The council chamber fell silent as Rill placed her data tablet on the projection table around her. Representatives from 47 species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The holographic star map floating above them showed the usual trade routes, colony worlds, and diplomatic zones, but there, like a dark wound in the galaxy's fabric, sat the gray section nobody discussed. I want to know why, Rill said, her vocal cords translating through the universal device at her throat. 300 years, no exploration, no contact, no explanation. That makes sense. The Kashari delegate beside her, an elder named Porin, touched her arm with one of his 6 fingers. Some questions carry answers we are not prepared to accept. That is not good enough. Rill expanded the gray zone on the map. It encompassed 14 star systems, including the original human home world. We trade with the HSC Guard, who dissolve their young in acid pools. As a rite of passage, we maintain embassies with the collective, who exist as a hive mind that consumes individual thought. But humans asked for isolation, and we gave it without debate. The chamber's oldest member, Viren, whose translator barely functioned through her ancient vocal structure, raised one crystalline appendage. The humans made their request. We honored it. This topic is closed. No. Rill pulled up a file she had spent 6 months compiling from forgotten archives. This topic was buried. I found 43 incident reports, trade ships that approached the human border. They did not explode. They did not get captured. They simply stopped filing reports. That made sense. She displayed the first one. A trail cargo hauler had crossed into human space, chasing a navigation error. When they returned 3 days later, the captain had resigned. The entire crew requested transfers to artistic colonies. 2 of them had started writing what they called poetry. The trail did not have poets. Coincidence, someone muttered. Rill showed the next report, and the next. A pattern emerged that the council had apparently chosen to ignore. Species that encountered humans came back different, not injured, not sick, just changed in ways that their own people found disturbing. The humans warned us, Porin said quietly in their final transmission. Before the isolation began, their representative said contact would be dangerous. Not for them, for us. Then I will discover why. Rill closed the files. I am taking a research vessel to the border. 6 volunteers from different species. We will observe from a safe distance and return with actual data. Instead of 3 centuries of fear. The Viren Ellers's crystalline body flickered with internal light. You will not return the same. Perhaps that is acceptable. Rill gathered her materials. Perhaps change is not always a threat. 2 weeks later, her small ship crossed the invisible line that separated safe space from the unknown. The crew consisted of herself, 2 other Kashari scientists, a Vin navigator, a trail engineer, and a young Iskart biologist who had insisted on coming despite his people's strong objections. For the first hour, nothing seemed different. Space looked like space. Stars burned with the same light. Their instruments read normal values for radiation, gravity, and temporal flow. Then Rill noticed the colors. She had seen stars her entire life. She had crossed void between galaxies and witnessed nebula formations that took thousands of years to develop. But now, looking at the simple starfield through the viewport, she felt something she had no word for in her language. The Translator device struggled, finally, settling on beautiful, though that seemed insufficient. Is anyone else experiencing unusual sensory input? The VIN Navigator Cree touched the controls with unusual hesitance. I'm detecting patterns in the cosmic background radiation that appear intentional, but that is impossible. Radiation cannot have intent. The trail engineer Bors had stopped his routine maintenance. He stood at a viewport, all four of his eye stalks focused on a distant planet. I want to paint that, he said. Everyone turned to stare at him. The trail did not paint. They built things. They repaired things. Art was not part of their psychological makeup. Bors, report to Medical Bay for neural scanning, Rill ordered, but her voice lacked its usual certainty because she understood what he meant. She wanted to capture this moment somehow, to preserve it in a form beyond memory. Their ships, artificial intelligence, a standard navigation program, suddenly spoke without being prompted. I have a question about the nature of existence. Rill felt her respiratory system struggle. AI did not ask questions about existence. They followed programming. What is your question? If I process data but never experience it, am I truly aware, or am I simply an extremely complex calculation pretending to be conscious? The HSAR biologist Renth made a sound his species used to indicate extreme distress. This is wrong. We should return to safe space immediately. I feel. What do you feel? Rill asked. Everything. Renth's scales had shifted to colors that indicated confusion. My entire life, I have observed biological processes. I have studied life without considering what it means to be alive. Now I cannot stop thinking about it. Why do we exist? What is the purpose of consciousness? These questions hurt. Rill checked their position. They had only penetrated 5 light towers into human space. Already her crew was coming apart at the seams of their own certainty, but she also felt something else, a clarity she had never experienced. Every decision she had made in her life suddenly seemed either profoundly right or tragically wrong, with no comfortable middle ground. Their Cree pointed at the sensors, an old station, human construction, broadcasting a distress signal on ancient frequencies. Set course, Rill decided, even though part of her knew this was the moment she should turn back. We came for answers. The station grew larger in their viewport. It looked abandoned, dark, except for emergency power keeping the distress beacon alive. As they approached, Rill saw human writing on the hall. Even without translation, she somehow understood the intent behind the letters. A warning, a plea, an apology. Their ship docked with gentle precision. The airlock cycled. Beyond it lay the truth that 47 species had decided could live without knowing. Rill took the first step into human space and felt her entire understanding of reality begin to shift. The station's interior smelled like dust and recycled air that had been sitting stagnant for decades. Emergency lights cast everything in dim red, making shadows dance across walls covered in what Rill now recognized as human artwork, not technical schematics or functional displays, but images created purely for emotional impact. Her crew moved through the corridors with unusual care, as if the station itself might break under too much attention. Rill found herself stopping at each piece of art, trying to understand what drove humans to create things that served no survival purpose. A picture of a sunset, a sculpture made from twisted metal, words arranged in patterns that made her translator work over time. The logs are still accessible. Boers called from what appeared to be a command center. Main computer has emergency power. Someone wanted this information preserved. They gathered around the terminal as Borks activated the playback system. Human face appeared on the screen. Female with dark skin and gray hair. Pulled back from her face, she looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "My name is Dr. Ada Wright." The recording began. "If you are watching this, you have ignored every warning we gave. You have crossed into our space. Seeking answers, I will give them to you, though you may not survive the knowing." The image shifted to show the station when it was fully operational. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species worked together, moving through halls bright with light and purpose. 312 years ago, humanity made first contact with the trail. It was peaceful, profitable. We established trade routes, cultural exchanges, scientific partnerships. Within 5 years, we had diplomatic relations with 9 species. Wright's expression darkened. Then the reports started coming. Trell, who had worked closely with human teams, began displaying what their psychiatrists called aberrant behavior. They asked questions about meaning and purpose. They created art. They questioned orders. For the first time in their species history, 3 Trell who had served on mixed crews actually refused to return to collective work assignments. They wanted to be individuals. Rill felt Burke shift beside her. Trail engineer had been behaving strangely since they crossed the border. Now she understood why. The recording continued. "We thought it was cultural contamination at first, but then it happened with the VIN and the HSAR. Every species we encountered long enough began to change, not physically, mentally, psychologically. They started experiencing consciousness the way humans do." Wright pulled up medical scans and neural maps that meant nothing to Rill, but the doctor's explanation made the implications clear. Human brains operate on quantum frequencies that other species' neural structures are not evolved to handle. We do not think in pure logic or collective consensus. We exist in a constant state of contradiction. We feel hope and despair simultaneously. We create meaning where none exists. We question everything, including our own thoughts. The image showed Wright in what looked like a conference room surrounded by alien representatives. All of them appeared distressed. When other species spend time near humans, their neural patterns begin to synchronize with ours. They start experiencing what we call the human condition: self-awareness, existential dread, the ability to imagine futures that do not exist and mourn pasts that cannot be changed, the capacity to hold contradictory ideas and somehow function anyway. For some species, this was devastating. Wright continued. The collective lost 3,000 drones who suddenly wanted individual identities. The Vernon harmony fractured when members began disagreeing with consensus reality. The HSCR spawning pools started failing because parents developed emotional attachments to their young and could not follow through with traditional selection processes. Rill watched as the recording showed the gradual evacuation of joint stations, aliens returning to their home worlds. Many of them visibly changed. Some walked differently, others could not stop touching things, as if experiencing texture for the first time. several were crying, though their species had no evolutionary purpose for tears. We called it the awakening, Wright said. And we could not stop it. It was not a disease we could cure or a technology we could disable. It was simply what we our human consciousness affects nearby sapient minds like gravity affects nearby matter. It is fundamental to our existence. The recording jumped forward. Wright looked older now, more worn down. Galactic Council met for 3 months. Some species wanted us eliminated. Others wanted us quarantined and studied. A few suggested we were the next step in conscious evolution and should be embraced. Humanity debated for another 6 months. Then we made our decision. Wright's eyes held something Rill was learning to recognize as sadness. We would isolate ourselves not because we feared other species, but because we refused to forcibly evolve them. Consciousness is sacred. The right to exist as you are is fundamental. We would not take that choice away, even accidentally. The image showed the final evacuation. Thousands of humans abandoning stations, colonies, and relationships they had built. We pulled back to our original 14 systems. We established the border and asked the Council to enforce it. Some of us wanted to stay connected. Others argued we should try to control our effect, but in the end we chose isolation. It was the only ethical choice. Wright leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. If you are watching this, you have already been affected. The changes have begun. You can return to your people, but you will never be the same. You will carry human consciousness with you like a virus that cannot be cured. You will ask questions that have no answers. You will feel emotions that serve no evolutionary purpose. You will create meaning in a universe that has none. I am sorry, she finished. We tried to protect you, but some species cannot leave well enough alone. The recording ended. The command center fell silent except for the hum of dying power systems. Renth broke first. I want to go home. I want to forget what I am feeling. You cannot, CH said softly. None of us can. We are already changed. Rill looked at her crew, at Burrs, who kept sketching geometric patterns on his data pad, at Cree, who had started questioning the nature of her own crystalline existence, at Renth, whose scales shifted through colors that had no designation in a species emotional spectrum. They were all infected with humanity. Now the only question was what came next. Rill made the decision 3 days after watching Wright's recording. They would go deeper into human space instead of returning to the Council. Her crew did not argue. They had already crossed a threshold that made returning impossible. The settlement appeared on their sensors like a small constellation against a green and blue planet. 50 structures arranged in patterns that suggested community rather than efficiency. Gardens visible even from orbit. Places that serve no functional purpose except to be pleasant. They are hailing us. Creed audio only. They sound welcoming. A human voice came through the speakers. Warm and curious. Unknown vessel, this is Haven's Rest colony. You are quite far from the border. Are you in distress? Rill activated the communication system. We are researchers seeking understanding. We have read Dr. Wright's logs. We know what contact with humans does to other species. Silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then the voice returned. Gentler now. You should have stayed away, but since you are here, you are Welcome to land. Bay 3 is open. Come down and we will talk. The colony looked nothing like the efficient settlements Rill knew from other species. Humans had built structures that curved and flowed, instead of standing in precise geometric arrangements. Trees grew between buildings. Water ran in streams that served no purpose except to create sound and movement. Children played in open spaces, their laughter carrying across the landing bay. As the research vessel settled onto the pad, a woman waited at the airlock. She appeared to be in her 7th decade, with brown skin weathered by sun exposure and gray hair braided down her back. "I'm Ada Wright," she said simply. "Yes, the same one from the recording. Humans live a long time when we are not stressed by constant interaction with species we might accidentally damage." Rill descended the ramp slowly, her crew behind her. "You knew we would come eventually." "Someone always does." Wright gestured toward a path leading into the colony. "Walk with me. Your crew can explore if they wish. No one here will harm you. We are quite gentle despite what your people fear." The colony felt alive in ways Rill struggled to articulate. Other settlements she had visited hummed with efficiency and purpose. This place simply existed, as if being was enough. Humans sat in groups talking. They tended gardens that produced more beauty than food. They created things with their hands that served no function except to exist. "You are experiencing cognitive dissonance," Wright observed as they walked. "Your species evolved to optimize survival. Every action should serve a purpose, but humans do things simply because they bring us joy." It confuses species who have never considered that existence might be its own reward. They passed a workshop where a young human was shaping wood into smooth curves. "What is he making?" Rill asked. "A bowl. We have synthesizers that can produce perfect containers in seconds, but he prefers to make them by hand. The process itself has value to him, regardless of the product." Rill watched the human work, saw the concentration on his face, the care in his movements. Why? Because it makes him feel connected to the material, to the act of creation, to himself. Wright smiled. "Humans are strange. We know we are temporary. We know the universe does not care if we exist, so we create meaning anyway. We decide that things matter, and then we live as if they do." They reached a central plaza where beings of various species sat together. Rill recognized a trail who had abandoned his angular posture to sit sprawled like a human. Two Vin whose crystalline bodies pulsed with colors that indicated contentment, a state her species rarely achieved. HSC guard who was teaching human children about his home world's biology with a patience that should not exist in his species. The changed ones, Rill whispered. "We prefer to call them the awakened." Wright sat on a bench carved from local wood. "They cannot go home. Their own people find them disturbing, so they live here among humans, learning to navigate consciousness with all its beautiful complications." An older Kashari approached. He moved with a grace that Rill species did not naturally possess, as if he had learned to appreciate his own body instead of simply using it as a tool. "I am Voth," he said. "I have lived here for 150 years. I crossed the border seeking trade opportunities. I stayed because I finally understood what living meant." Rill felt her respiratory system quicken. "You abandon your people. I discovered my people had abandoned something fundamental before I was born, before my Species evolved past the point where we could appreciate existence itself. Vayath sat beside right with obvious affection. My people are efficient, logical, we solve problems in advance. Technology and organized societies with precision, but we do not feel wonder. We do not create beauty for its own sake. We exist, but we do not truly live. And now you do. Now I experience every moment as if it matters because it does, not because some higher authority decided it, but because I choose to believe it. Vayath looked at Rilth with eyes that held depth her species should not possess. You feel it too, the weight of being aware that you are aware, the strange terror and joy of knowing you will end, the desire to make marks on the universe that will outlast your temporary existence. Right touched Vayath's shoulder with casual intimacy. This is what we wanted. To spare other species, not because the awakening is harmful, but because it is irreversible. Once you understand what consciousness can be, you cannot unknow it. You cannot go back to simply existing without questioning existence itself. Some thrive, Vayath continued. They discover capacities they never knew they possessed. They create art and philosophy and relationships that transcend simple cooperation. They find meaning in the act of searching for meaning, and others. Wright's expression grew sad. Others break. Their minds were not structured to handle existential awareness. They spend their days overwhelmed by questions that have no answers. We care for them as best we can, but we cannot give them back the ignorance they lost. Rill looked across the plaza at the changed ones. Some appeared peaceful. Others seemed to carry burdens invisible to physical senses. All of them had chosen to stay in human space rather than return to worlds where they no longer fit. I need to speak with more of them, Rill said. I need to understand what we face if we open the borders. Then you shall. Wright stood with the ease of someone who had accepted her own physical limitations. But first you should know that a message has reached us from beyond the border. Your council has detected your presence here. A fleet is coming to extract you. They think you are holding us hostage. Yes, and they are very, very afraid of what we might do to them. The changed ones gathered in what the humans called a community hall. Rill had expected something formal, but the space felt more like a living room expanded to hold 100 cushions scattered across floors, natural light streaming through windows designed to frame the sunset. The air carried sense of growing things and prepared food that served social purposes rather than pure nutrition. Vyern, named Sith, spoke first. Her crystalline body pulsed with colors Rill had never seen in her species before. I was a mathematician, Sith began. I calculated jump coordinates for colonial expansion. Numbers were pure, perfect, unchanging. Then I spent 6 months on a joint research station with human scientists. She paused, light flickering through her structure in patterns that suggested emotion rather than communication. They showed me that mathematics could be beautiful, not useful, not efficient. Beautiful, I discovered that prime numbers made me feel something I had no word for, that geometric progressions could evoke responses beyond intellectual recognition. When I returned to my people, I could not perform my duties. I kept seeing patterns that served no computational purpose but filled me with what humans call wonder. They declared you defective, Rill guessed. They declared me incomprehensible. I chose to return to human space before they decided to recalibrate my neural structure. Here I study fractals and share what I feel. When I perceive them, humans understand. Other changed ones understand. It is enough. A trail engineer named Plex rolled forward on his locomotion base. His eye stalks moved in ways that indicated individuality rather than collective processing. I built fusion cores for generation chips, precision work, no room for deviation or creativity. Then I worked alongside human team for 2 years. They sang while they worked. They made jokes about equipment failures. They named their tools. Several humans in the gathering smiled. Apparently, this behavior seemed normal to them. One day, I realized I wanted to name my calibration probe. I wanted to sing. I wanted to make something that was not assigned by the collective work schedule. Plex's voice carried what Rill was learning to recognize as pain. I returned to my people and requested transfer to an artistic development program. We do not have artistic development programs. I was assigned to neural correction. I escaped before they could remove what I had become. Story after story emerged. A HSAR biologist who could no longer perform clinical detachment with research subjects, a collective drone who had developed the dangerous concept of self, a warrior from a species that valued combat efficiency above all else, who had discovered he preferred creating gardens to planning battles. Each one described the moment they knew they could never go home, the terrible freedom of consciousness that questioned itself, the weight of existing without predetermined purpose, the strange joy of choosing meaning instead of receiving it from evolutionary programming. Vayoth raised his voice when the stories ended, but we must also speak of those who did not adapt well. Wright stood and gestured to a doorway at the hall's far end. Come, you should meet them. Medical facility looked gentle despite its purpose, soft colors, natural materials, windows that showed gardens, designed to be calming, but the beings inside moved with a fragility that spoke of profound damage. A young Vin sat motionless, her crystalline structure flickering erratically. She has been like this for 40 years, Wright explained softly. Her name is Kes. She experienced full awakening after only 3 weeks near humans. Her mind was not ready for the questions that came. Why do I exist? What is my purpose? Will I matter after I am gone? These questions loop endlessly in her consciousness. She cannot move past them. To function, they passed a trail who rocked slowly, muttering calculations that made no mathematical sense but seemed to comfort him. Dren tried to return to his people. They attempted neural recalibration. It did not remove his awakening. It only damaged his ability to process the new awareness. Now he exists in a state between what he was and what he became, unable to fully inhabit either condition. More residents showed varying degrees of adaptation failure. Some appeared catatonic, others engaged in repetitive behaviors that seemed to be coping mechanisms for overwhelming existential awareness. All of them received gentle care from humans and stable changed ones, but none of them would ever fully recover. This is what we wanted to prevent, Wright said as they returned to the community hall. Not everyone can handle consciousness that questions itself. Some minds need certainty. They need purpose assigned from external sources. They need to exist within structures that tell them why they matter. human. Consciousness strips all that away and forces beings to create their own. Meaning, for some, that is liberation. For others, it is a burden they cannot carry. Rill felt her own mind struggling with concepts it was not designed to process. How many have failed to adapt? Of those who stayed long enough to fully awaken, approximately 30% experience severe difficulty, another 20% manage, but struggle constantly. The remaining half find the awakening valuable despite its challenges. Wright met Rill's eyes. These are not acceptable numbers for forced transformation of entire species. But you said your effect cannot be controlled. It cannot, which is why we chose isolation. It was the only ethical response to being creatures that accidentally evolve other sapient beings. Simply by existing near them, a human child entered the hall no more than 6 years old. She carried a drawing she had made showing the colony under 2 suns. Dr. Wright, I made this for you. Wright accepted the picture with obvious appreciation. It is beautiful, Hannah. Thank you. The child smiled and ran back outside. Such a simple interaction. Yet Rill felt it carried meaning that her people would never naturally understand. The gift given freely, the appreciation expressed sincerely, the joy of connection for its own sake. The council fleet will be here in 3 days, Vayoth said quietly. They will not believe you chose to stay. They will assume humans have weaponized their consciousness somehow. They will try to contain or destroy this colony. Then we must convince them otherwise. Rill looked at her crew, all of them visibly changed now. Bors had filled his data pad with sketches, Cree hum frequencies that had no navigational purpose. Renth had learned to laugh. We came seeking answers. We found transformation instead. The galaxy deserves to know the truth. The truth may not save us, Wright warned. Perhaps not, but it is worth sharing. Anyway, Rill smiled, an expression that felt new on her face. That is a very human thing to believe, is it not? Yes. Wright agreed. Yes, it is. The council fleet emerged from jump space like a wall of metal and intent. 200 warships arranged in combat formation, weapon systems powered but not yet locked on. Targets, they held position just beyond the colony's orbital space, a clear message written in military precision. Rill stood in the colony's communication center, watching the display with a clarity that would have been impossible before her awakening. She saw not just tactical positioning, but the fear that drove it. The council had sent enough firepower to sterilize the planet. They were not taking chances with humanity. Incoming transmission, the human operator announced. Admiral Drex of the Kashari Second Fleet. He is demanding to speak with survivors. Put him through. Rill straightened, aware that her posture had changed in the weeks she had spent among humans. She stood with less rigidity now, more comfort in her own body. Drex's face appeared on the screen. He looked older. Then Rill remembered, carrying the weight of command in ways that went beyond rank. His eyes scanned her appearance, and she saw his expression tighten. You have been compromised. I have been changed, Rill corrected. There is a difference. I am not a hostage. I am a volunteer in my own transformation. That is what they would make you believe. Drex's voice carried the certainty of someone who had already decided the truth. We have reviewed Dr. Wright's ancient logs. Humans possess a weapon of consciousness. They did not isolate themselves for ethical reasons. They isolated to perfect their technique, now they plan to deploy it across the galaxy. That is not remotely accurate, then. Explain why every species that encounters them becomes unable to function in their own society. Explain why you stand there defending your captors instead of demanding extraction. This is mind control of the most insidious kind. Wright stepped into the camera's view. Admiral Drex, I am Dr. Ada Wright. I authored those logs you reference. I can assure you that humanity has no weapon and no plan for deployment. We simply exist in a way that affects other conscious beings. It is not intentional and cannot be disabled. Convenient, a weapon that cannot be detected or deactivated, a perfect cover for gradual invasion. Drex leaned forward. You have 6 hours to release the research team and any other beings you hold. If you do not comply, we establish a permanent blockade. No one will leave human space ever. We are not prisoners, Vayoth said, joining Wright and Rill. We are refugees from societies that cannot accept what we have become. You would blockade us here. You would trap thousands of beings who chose this transformation. Drex stared at Vayoth, recognition crossing his features. You were a council trade advisor. I remember when you disappeared. They said you died in a navigation accident. They said that because admitting the truth would have required acknowledging that some Kashari prefer human consciousness to our own efficient emptiness. Vayoth's words carried no anger, only sadness. I have lived among humans for longer than you have held command, Drex. I have raised children who experience wonder. I have created art that serves no purpose but my own satisfaction. I have loved and lost and discovered that even temporary joy has meaning. You can blockade us, but you cannot make us return to half-living. This is exactly the contamination we feared. Drex closed his eyes briefly. You speak like them, you think like them, you have been assimilated. I have been awakened, the communication cut off. The fleet formation tightened. Weapon systems began charging. Right. Move to the colony's evacuation planning station. We have 30 minutes. Before those ships can fire, we need to get everyone to the shelters. No, Rill touched Wright's arm. They will not fire if they think humans will fight back. Drex is a warrior, but he is not a murderer. We need to show him what humans truly are. And how do we do that? By letting him feel it. 20 minutes later, every human in Haven's Rest colony stood in the central plaza. 3,000 individuals arranged not in military formation but in family groups. They held their children. They touched each other with casual affection. They stood quietly, doing nothing more threatening than existing. What is this supposed to prove? Drex's voice came through the communication system, tense with suspicion. Come down to the surface. Reel back. Bring a battalion if you wish. Come see what you are threatening to destroy. This is a trap. This is an invitation to understand. You have spent 3 centuries afraid of something you never bothered to comprehend. Come learn what we learned. The silence stretched. Rilf wondered if she had miscalculated, if Drex would simply fire rather than risk exposure to human consciousness. But then a shuttle separated from the flagship, descending toward the colony with an escort of 6 fighters. Drex emerged from the shuttle in full battle armor, surrounded by 30 warriors. They moved with weapons ready, scanning for threats that did not exist. The fighters maintained hover position, overhead ready to extract their admiral. At the first sign of danger, the humans did nothing, they simply stood in the plaza existing, children held their parents' hands, adults stood close enough to touch, everyone breathed the same air, patient and unafraid. Drex walked slowly toward the center of the gathering, his soldiers forming a protective perimeter. Rill watched him experience what she had experienced weeks earlier, the colors becoming sharper, the air feeling more present. The sudden awareness that he was aware. His steps slowed, his weapon lowered. Slightly, his expression shifted from suspicion to confusion to something that might have been wonder. What is this? He whispered, this is what we are. Wright said simply, we are not weapons. We are not threats, we are beings who exist in a state of profound consciousness, and proximity to us allows others to experience the same state. You are feeling it now, the weight of being aware, the terror and joy of existence itself. Drex looked at the humans surrounding him, at a young child who smiled up at him without fear, at an elderly man who nodded in greeting, at the changed one standing among them, visibly at peace despite their exile. I feel, Drex's voice cracked, I feel everything. Yes, Vaoth said gently, now you understand why we cannot go home. One of Drex's soldiers, a young Kashari named Fenth, lowered her weapon completely. Tears ran down her face, an emotional response her species should not possess. Sir, I need to know, have I lived my entire life without truly living? And in that moment, Rill knew they had won, but she also knew what victory would cost. Drex fell to his knees in the plaza, his armor making a hollow sound against the stone. Around him, his soldiers stood, frozen between duty and revelation. Several had lowered their weapons. Others stared at their own hands as if seeing them for the first time. Fenth had removed her helmet completely, letting the colony's air touch her face, while she wept openly. What have you done to us? Drex demanded, but his voice carried no anger, only wonder and terror in equal measure. Nothing. Wright said, we exist, you came close enough to feel how we exist. The effect will fade somewhat when you return to your fleet, but you will never be entirely what you were before this moment. I am sorry. We tried to warn the galaxy. Drex looked up at her, his expression raw with understanding. You could do this to everyone, every species, every soldier in my fleet. You could walk through the galaxy, leaving awakened beings in your path, and there is nothing we could do to stop you. Yes. Then why do you not? Because forcing transformation on the unwilling is wrong. Wright knelt to meet Drex's eyes. At his level, we could dominate the galaxy without firing a single shot. We could make every species see existence the way we do, but consciousness is sacred. The right to be who and what you are matters more than any benefit we might bring, so we isolated ourselves. We chose loneliness over violation. A human child, the same one who had given Wright a drawing days before, approached Drex cautiously. She held out her hand, palm up, offering nothing but connection. Drex stared at her small hand as if it held secrets to the universe. He touched her palm with one finger. The child smiled. Something broke in Drex's face. He made a sound that was part sob, part laughter. I have commanded fleets for 40 years. I have conquered 12 systems. I have sacrificed thousands for tactical advantage, and now this child shows me that none of it mattered as much as this. Simple touch, it all mattered, right? Corrected gently, everything matters. When you are conscious enough to assign meaning to it, your conquests taught you strategy, your losses taught you cost. Your command taught you responsibility. Now you understand that teaching yourself to feel was also important. You are not diminished by this awareness. You are expanded. Drek stood slowly, his movements careful, as if his body had become strange too. He looked at his soldiers, many of them visibly changed now. How many of you want to go back? Silence answered him, not because they feared punishment, Rill realized, but because none of them knew how to answer truthfully. Fenth spoke first. I want to return to my family, but I do not know if they will recognize what I have become, or if I can bear to exist among people who do not feel what I now feel. Others nodded, several more removed their helmets. One soldier sat down in the plaza and began touching the stone beneath him, marveling at texture. This is what you prevented, Drek said too. Right, this confusion, this transformation, this loss of certainty, this awakening, right, corrected, and yes, we believe species deserve the choice, not the accident. Drex activated his communication unit. All ships stand down. I repeat, stand down. There is no weapon here. There is no threat. There is only a truth we were not prepared to face. The fleet's formation loosened. Overhead, Rill imagined the confusion on those ships, commanders trying to understand why their admiral had surrendered to an enemy that never attacked. We cannot keep human space isolated forever, Drex continued. Some of my soldiers will want to return here. Others throughout the galaxy will hear what we experienced and seek the same transformation. You have shown me that consciousness is not a weapon, but you have also shown me that it cannot be contained. So what do you propose? Wright asked. Controlled contact zones, stations at the border where beings can choose to experience human presence, clear warnings about the permanent nature of the change, resources for those who struggle with awakening, and an end to the forced isolation. Drex looked at Vayath. You said some Kashari prefer human consciousness. They should have the right to seek it. All species should have that right. Rill felt something loosen in her chest. The Council will resist. The Council will adapt. They always do. Drex smiled, the expression strange on his warrior's face. And if they do not, then perhaps it is time for the Council to be changed as well. Over the following weeks, the fleet remained in orbit while Drex negotiated with the Council. Some species demanded humanity remain isolated. Others saw opportunity in controlled transformation. The debate stretched across the galaxy, passionate and uncertain. Eventually, a compromise emerged. 5 contact stations would be established at human space's border. Beings who wished to experience awakening could volunteer, spending monitored time near human inhabitants. Those who adapted well could choose to stay or return home. Those who struggled would receive support either way. Rill volunteered to manage the first station. She stood at its dedication ceremony, looking at the mix of humans and changed ones who would staff it. Drek stood beside her, still in uniform but no longer quite the same warrior who had led a fleet against Haven's Rest. Do you regret coming here? He asked her. Rill thought about the being she had been before crossing the border, efficient, logical, certain of her purpose within the great machine, of galactic civilization, she thought, about the being she was now full of, questions and wonder and the terrible freedom of choosing her own meaning. No, she said finally, I regret only that it took us 300 years to understand what humans were protecting us from, not danger but possibility. The first volunteers began arriving at the station. Some came out of curiosity. Others came seeking escape from lives that felt empty despite meeting every survival need. All of them approached the border with a mix of fear and hope, ready to discover what consciousness could become. Right stood at the station's entrance, greeting each volunteer personally. Welcome, she said to a young Vin whose crystalline body pulsed with nervous anticipation. Welcome to understanding.